same circles, and they began to suspect that all three crimes were connected. But what began as a crusade for justice among grieving parents took a drastically shocking turn when investigators discovered that the Bakersfield Three were embroiled in a criminal underworld of black market weapons smuggling, the Hells Angels, unspecified ties to drug cartel, torture, and kidnapping, and a convicted felon that went by the name the Boogeyman of Bakersfield. This is a genuinely bizarre case, and this person says, I've never written up a case for this sub before. I've been following this story closely for the last couple of years. The last time it was mentioned on Reddit over a year ago, there have been some huge recent developments in the last year I thought deserved further as comprehensive telling as possible. Despite all that, it is still nowhere near resolved. So, without further ado, Part 1, Missing. On March 23rd, 2018, Micah Holzenbake, age 34, went missing in East Bakersfield, near the intersection of Flower Street and Mount Vernon Avenue. Micah was a clean-cut dad who worked in finance, a former high school debater who loved karaoke, despite the fact that he was not any good at it. He was presumed endangered missing until August 22nd of 2018, when teenagers swimming near a local park found an arm in the Kern River that was identified as his. But the rest of his body has never been found. On April 18th, 2018, James Kolstad, age 38, was murdered on a quiet block in southwest Bakersfield. He was a father of 2 daughters, a serial entrepreneur described as the type of man who could sell a dollar bill on the side of the road for $1 million if he could just get 5 minutes with you. His brother Ryan heard the gunshots the next street over, but did not see the shooter, and he claims that he held his brother in his arms as he died. Can you even imagine? On April 25th, 2018, Bailey Perrin Despal, I'm probably messing that up, age 20, disappeared from Rosedale, the upper-class middle neighborhood in northwest Bakersfield, where she'd grown up. Bailey described herself as a flower child who had been born in the wrong generation. After facing a number of serious challenges, she was struggling to get her life back on track, and she was said to be pregnant and trying to leave her boyfriend when she went missing. She was never heard from again. Local media christened Micah, James, and Bailey the Bakersfield Three after the victims' families discovered that they all knew each other. In the wake of the links between the 3 disappearances coming to light, Micah's father told a local news reporter, just to be blunt, something happened to Micah. A month later, something happened to Bailey, and I think it's because she knew what happened to Micah. And in between them, there was James, who ran in the same circles as Bailey and had helped Micah move just weeks before they were both killed. Now, Bakersfield is a city of 500,000 people, but on a social level, it can feel as insular as any small town. You're rarely more than 1 or 2 degrees removed from anyone that you meet, even in a city where everyone seems to know someone. It's really hard to buy the fact that 3 friends all going missing in the space of a month is sheer coincidence. But as time goes on, few official developments in this investigation happen, and it seems like people largely lost interest in the case in late 2019. especially drug-related one. Opioid abuse is rampant, though it still falls second to methamphetamines, the most widespread drug in the area. There's a significant issue with white supremacist gang violence. The writer says, when I was 16, my 70-year-old next-door neighbor got stabbed in a biker gang fight at a tattoo parlor by a Hells Angel. Wow. A high school chemistry teacher was literally arrested for trying to make meth in his classroom 3 months before Breaking Bad even premiered. This is a region with a lot of serious problems that go deeper than any one symptom. Suffice to say, there's a reason that I moved away as I turned 18. Wow. The other thing you need to know is that despite it being one of the most conservative cities in California, there is a widespread distrust of law enforcement outside of the police and the courts themselves. And frankly, for a good reason. Corruption in the justice system is widespread, and basically a local tradition dating back to the tenure of longtime District Attorney Ed Jagels, perhaps best known for ramming through 36 false convictions of ritual child abuse at the height of the Satanic Panic. 34 were eventually overturned, and the other 2 people convicted died in prison and never saw justice. Jagels' history of prosecutorial misconduct is also the subject of Mean Justice, a 600-page doorstopper by Pulitzer-winning author Ed Humes about the wrongful conviction of Pat Dunn, currently serving a life sentence for the murder of his wife, despite a wealth of evidence that would suggest his innocence. Maybe we'll cover that one. I didn't want to edit this post, so I'm giving you this background information. In 2002, Jagels' protege and assistant DA named Steve Towser was murdered by a former Bakersfield police deputy, Chris Hillis, after Hillis allegedly learned that Towser had a relationship with his 22-year-old son, an addict in recovery. Facing first-degree murder charges, he pled out to manslaughter and received a 12-year prison sentence. In 2015, The Guardian published an in-depth expose on how widespread the corruption within local law enforcement led Kern County to having the highest rate of police killings in the country. The deadliest cops per capita. Yikes. So, over the past several years, the Kern County law enforcement community has been mired in a police corruption scandal in which members of the BPD abused asset forfeiture laws to illegally seize guns, drugs, and money from suspects, in which they in turn trafficked for personal gain. All this is to say that the Bakersfield cops and prosecutors have not endangered much public trust outside of their own communities. In a city with the highest rates of violent crime, law enforcement has consistently put its own interests above public safety, justice, or victims' rights. The author says that that's just something to keep in mind while you're reading this. Part 3, Down the Rabbit Hole. Micah. In the weeks and months prior to Michael Olsenbake's disappearance, his family could tell that something was really troubling him. Lance and Cheryl Olsenbake both recall their son behaving erratically in the days before he vanished. But none of it seemed to make any sense coming from someone like Micah, whose family described him as intelligent and hardworking. He had a comfortable upbringing in Rosedale and worked his way into a lucrative career as a financial advisor, despite only 1 year of college. Good for you, Micah. In the photo his family is circulating following his disappearance, he wore the student tie and a placid smile of someone posing for a corporate headshot. But Micah was going through a dark time following a rocky separation from his wife and family, and he had been struggling with a painkiller addiction for the past 2 years. The year before, he'd been laid off from his job after going on disability leave due to depression. According to court documents, Micah owed drug-related debts to members of the Hells Angels as well as the cartel. Quotes, the cartel. One parents mostly wrote this off, which is sad. Micah had been hanging around with James Cole's dad for some time before he disappeared. It's not clear when they first met, but it appears that they became friendly through the drug scene. Like Micah, James first became addicted to painkillers, prescription painkillers, after being hit by a car, before progressing to fentanyl patches and eventually heroin. He'd been a single father to his daughters Cameron and August. His obituary characterized him as a free-wheeling surfer who held a patent for action sports product and earned the nickname Joe Vegas for his love of gambling and table games. Cameron, age 19 when this post was written, says she and James had an especially close relationship after her mother died when she was an infant, and James often warned her against getting involved with drugs and partying, which made it even harder to watch him spiral downward in the years before his death. I felt like I lost him even before I lost him, but I worked so hard, she told a reporter. I was working so hard on everything I could do to make him get better. I was hanging on to hope, and whoever killed him took that away. Poor thing. I don't have that anymore, she says. I don't have hope. In the wake of her father's death, Cameron says a number of stories and rumors about his life surfaced, further complicating her grief. Some of the stories I've heard is that he was a really bad person these last 3 years. On the night of his murder, James reportedly drove to an acquaintance's house in South Bakersfield, where his brother Ryan was hanging out. Ryan claims that the homeowner allegedly owed money to James and told Ryan that if James came over to his house, he would call his boys and they would come over strapped, which Ryan says he really didn't interpret as a serious threat. Are you kidding? Ryan and James reportedly argued about this on the phone, and James showed up a couple hours later. Ryan says he had just returned from driving someone else home and noticed a driver in a silver sedan behaving suspiciously as he returned to the house. Moments later, Ryan and his unidentified male passenger heard gunshots on the next block. An unknown gunman had opened fire on James from another car, causing him to crash into a parked trailer. The same silver sedan was seen speeding away from the scene. That's crazy. I can't imagine watching that. The owner of the home where all this took place was Dr. Sajid Bajwa. I'm so bad with names, and even when I look them up, I can't remember how to pronounce them. I need to put like little inserts. He was, at the time, a chiropractor with a local practice. He lived in a quiet subdivision in southwest Bakersfield, a very unlikely setting for a drive-by shooting. And according to initial news reports, the police were at a loss for the motive behind the killing, or why James was in the neighborhood at all. And then things began to unravel. Dr. Bajwa, it turned out, had been arrested twice in 2016 and 17 after driving while impaired. And in addition to liquid heroin, Xanax, and hydrocodone, police also found 2 unregistered loaded guns in his car. An AR-15 and a .22 LR semi-automatic rifle with a fake silencer attached. All of this was detailed in a disciplinary complaint filed by the California Board of Chiropractic Examiners. After Bajwa's name began repeatedly surfacing in connection with the shooting, a rumor began to circulate about a black market gun and drug trafficking ring, which Bajwa was supposedly a central figure. It was the type of conspiracy theory that most people instinctively just write off as too bizarre to be credible. But it must have rung a bell to Lance Olsenbake. Before Micah's disappearance, he told his father that he was putting guns together for people. Lance said he reacted in disbelief to this confession because the idea that Micah would risk his career Bailey was 20 years old when she was reported missing in April of 2018. The family say that it was her disappearance that finally motivated police and local news to start investigating the links between all three of these cases. For reasons that seem obvious to anyone who has ever seen the media react to a pretty white 20-year-old going missing. Her sister, Caitlin, describes Bailey as a girl that's grown up in a good neighborhood, raised by good parents, who had a good childhood, and everything she could have ever wanted, much like Micah and James. Beneath the surface, Bailey was as troubled as either of the men. After graduating high school, she'd run off to Vegas to marry her boyfriend, but their rocky relationship turned into an abusive marriage that ended just 1 year later. In the aftermath of this, she wrecked her car, lost her job, and according to her mother, her life just spiraled out of control. In 2017, Bailey was arrested for disorderly conduct in front of her friend Michael's Big's house. This came as a surprise to her sister, who at one point had been friendly with Micah herself, but she didn't realize that he and Bailey even knew each other. Even though he was 14 years Bailey's senior, Caitlin remembered him as a clean-cut guy who worked at a bank. And their mother, Jane, says Micah helped her get a restraining order against an abusive ex-boyfriend. They didn't see any cause for concern. Still, Bailey's life continued to spiral out of control, and the following month, she was drugged and assaulted at an acquaintance's apartment complex. Bailey disappeared for days at a time and resurfaced with horrible stories and terrible phone calls where she begged to be picked up. On one occasion, Caitlin remembers she had none of her belongings, no shoes, no purse. A couple of nights after that, there were 2 vehicles that came to pick her up, and we could tell by the look on her face she didn't want to go. But if she didn't go, we didn't know what would happen. The next part is labeled Matthew. Not long after that incident, Bailey got herself a new boyfriend. Matthew Queen was 43 years old. A convicted felon and an all-around bad dude. Not much is known about his background except one major exception. In the early 2000s, he pled guilty to 1 count of making a false statement to a federal firearms dealer after he used a false address but his real name to purchase $11,000 in guns from dealers in Indiana. Many of those guns were later recovered at crime scenes in Detroit and Chicago. It does recommend that if you want to know more about this man, you read the following ruling on the case. They put a little excerpt, and I'll read that to you. It says, we reject Queen's argument that gun buyers may lie about a street address so long as they live within the state where the gun is sold. Queen, in fact, had once lived in an apartment at 2072 Egret Court, but he did not live at this address when he completed the forms and bought guns because he was evicted for non-payment of rent. The author says, great, sounds like a great dude. Lest you assume Matthew Queen might have hypothetically seen the error of his ways and clean up his act in this early foray into gun running, he absolutely did not. In December of 2017, just a couple of weeks after Matthew and Bailey had met, they were arrested after police found 4 unmarked, unregistered, loaded assault rifles in Matthew's car during a traffic stop. Why do you need 4? But neither he nor Bailey said a word to the police. But while Matthew, who is a convicted felon, is prohibited from carrying guns or ammunition at all, was charged with several felonies, Bailey pled no contest to a lesser misdemeanor and received 3 years of probation. Later that month, she moved in with Matthew, his mother, and his estranged wife. Bailey's family saw and heard even less from her, and in April, a month after Micah's disappearance and just 1 day after she and Matthew attended court for their weapons charges, was last seen. It was positively identified in late December, but by this point, the family of the Bakersfield 3 investigation had amassed around 10,000 followers on Facebook and another 5,000 in a private group, and this story was a fixture on local news. Another curveball came around this time when a former friend of Bailey's named Sarah Wiedemeyer, age 21, filed a restraining order against Bailey's mother, Jane Parent. As it was reported, Sarah had moved in with Matthew mere weeks after Bailey disappeared, and she was 4 months pregnant with his child when she attempted to take out legal action against Miss Parent, who she claimed was harassing her and her fiancé by hanging up missing persons flyers in their neighborhood. Give me a break. The restraining order was not granted, but Queen allegedly began making disturbing social media posts about Bailey, Micah, and the Parent family, with Mrs. Parent as the primary target. And in mid-2019, the investigation seemed to grind to a halt. Part 4. New developments. On May 27, 2020, roughly 2 years after the first developments in the Bakersfield 3 case, the Kern County District Attorney held a press conference to announce they believe that Bailey Despo and Matthew Queen deliberately and with premeditation murdered Micah Olsenbake. Bailey and Matthew, along with a third man, another Matthew, were charged with alleged kidnapping, torture, and first-degree murder, as well as unlawful manufacturing of assault weapons, conspiracy related to murder and torture plot, and a slew of other assault and gun charges. 34 in total, remember? Matthew and Matthew were both in custody at the time the charges against them were filed. Bailey still hasn't been seen or heard from since 2018. The DA's office did issue a warrant for her arrest, leading some speculation that she might still be alive. According to court records, Matthew Queen allegedly believed Michael Olsenbake had stolen a .44 caliber revolver from him. He and Bailey kidnapped Micah, zip-tied him to a chair in Matthew Van Castasteel. Yeah, that's a very long name. In his garage and attempt to torture him in order to extract information from him. A bloodstain in the garage matched Micah's DNA. Van Castasteel told police he didn't see or hear Micah on the night he was killed. But it's your garage, dude. But he knew the other two had brought him there to question him. What? After several hours, Bailey allegedly returned to the apartment, seeming flustered. She changed her clothes in a back bedroom before they left Van Castasteel. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Matthew Queen told him he had cleaned everything up and it was okay to go inside the garage. The next day, Queen returned to Van Castasteel's apartment and said he needed help disposing of something in a large black storage container in the trunk of his car. Van Castasteel claims he refused to help dispose of the body, but according to police reports, his Google history during that period of time included searches for lye chemical formula, lye for sale, and how long does it take to dissolve a human body. Come on, y'all. As well as browsing for lye on the Home Depot and Lowe's websites. Bailey and Matthew allegedly manufactured and sold AR-15s from gun build kits. Other witness testimony released by the courts described various kidnappings that witnesses allege Matthew Queen, known as the Boogeyman of Bakersfield, committed. In one incident, he had allegedly handcuffed a victim to a chair, put an electric dog collar around his neck because he believed that the man had stolen a gun from him. Another witness said that Matthew showed up armed at his hotel room after the witness told Bailey where he was staying, and he believed they intended to kill him because he'd been arrested with a large quantity of narcotics that he had been fronted or given without paying for them, and the people who he had gotten the narcotics from would be quite upset. According to the police report, surveillance footage from the hotel corroborates this. It's also believed that Matthew made anonymous calls to the police tip line Bakersfield. There have been no developments in the investigation of James Kolstad's murder since 2018. Ultimately, what frustrates the author about this case is that even after this avalanche of charges, so many questions remain unsolved. Not just what happened and who did it, but why. If the investigation concluded that James Kolstad's death was unrelated to the disappearances of Bailey and Micah, who ordered his murder, then what was the reason? To what extent was the chiropractor involved with Queen and Van de Kessel's trafficking ring? Was Sarah Wiedemeyer involved with Bailey's disappearance? And if not, how did she end up living with Matthew Queen and expecting his child just 2 months after her friend went missing? Why did Sarah and Matthew harass Bailey's mother for months after Bailey's disappearance? More than anything, the author says, I'm still lost as to Bailey's motivation in all of this. Did she just find herself in too deep with no way out? Did she actively make the choice to become a gun runner? Did Matthew, looking to settle a grudge against Micah, seek out a relationship with Bailey with the intention of using her to get to him? Did he kill her because she was cooperating with the cops, because she attempted to leave him, or because he was just a sociopath who felt she was no longer useful? Is there a chance that law enforcement knows more than they've let on? When investigators told Mrs. Barrett that Matthew isn't a suspect in her disappearance, was that an indication that she may, in fact, be alive? The author finals this out with probably not, but at this point, anything is possible. So like I said, I started researching this case looking for Micah, and it kind of spiraled into this whole big thing, but I really felt like that author, that Reddit post, and I verified the information, put it together way more eloquently than I could have. I don't have any theories on this one, except I think that the author is probably right. I think that Matthew had something to do with Bailey's disappearance. He seemed like a super shady guy. I think Micah got in too deep, and I think maybe James did the same. You know, these drug runners and gun runners, they know what they're doing is not right, and they will take you out if you threaten to get them caught, or, you know, things like that. Coming from the side where I've worked in pain management for several years and dealt with people who are in such terrible pain and addicted to these opioids, I understand that people get extremely desperate to get the medications that they are addicted to, because withdrawal sucks. It won't kill you, but it sucks. So yes, I fully believe that these 3 cases are interconnected. I fully believe that the boogeyman of Bakersfield is the person they should be looking into, and the fact that they say that he's not a suspect makes me incredibly furious. I'm so sorry that I cannot speak while reading other people's words, so I fumbled quite a bit through this video. I hope that is not too off-putting for you. Anyway, tell me, have you heard about the Bakersfield 3? Have you heard about any of these cases? Do you have any theories? Do you have any facts that I could not find? There really was just not a lot of comprehensive information on any of these cases. I do think it's kind of strange that if Micah is supposedly buried somewhere, they found his arm in the river. That doesn't make any sense to me. Obviously, it was hard to get him in a tote, but why was he in 2 separate places? And if they think he's buried in the hills, why don't they go out there and look for him, just to find him, to bring his family some more closure? Do I think